Minailov presents. In Turkey, Stalin lived in Artvin and in the village of Taşburun, 120 kilometers from Istanbul, where he hunted wild boars. We go hunting boars at night, but we don't eat their meat, because it is forbidden for Muslims. I live in the city of Osmaniye in Turkey. The city is surrounded by mountains and forests. There are a lot of forests there, so there is plenty of wildlife. There are wild boars, wild goats, wolves, and deer. There are many historical sites, and there are also entrances to the caves that are stretching on for miles. We usually go out to hunt boars at night, between 12 and 3 a.m. We shoot them with double-barreled shotguns. We leave the carcasses of dead boars there.
Haram.
Because when we became Muslims, their meat became forbidden for us. Stalin came to Turkey and lived in Artvin, and also in the village of Taşburun, 120 kilometers from Istanbul. In Artvin he hunted wild boars, in Taşburun too, and was well acquainted with the ancient sites of Turkey. Stalin became a great man, because he wanted to learn the secrets of the ancients, and he learned them.
The forests of Turkey hide many secrets. And it is not just the ruins of ancient Roman temples. In these forests there are temples that are even more ancient. Some of the most extraordinary people have been attracted to these sacred places. They were different from others, even before they came into contact with some of these spiritual treasures, but after that contact, they changed even more. For example, here in Turkey, by the ruins of ancient temples, Comrade Stalin has learned something that transformed him into the man he became. Little is known about Comrade Stalin's 2-year stay in Turkey, but it is likely that the most important piece of information has been preserved. Very young Comrade Stalin hunted boars in Turkey. And he was doing that for no fewer than 2 years. Stalin started hunting boars in the vicinity of a village near the present border of Georgia, in Artvin province. And then he hunted in the vicinity of villages Adapazarı and Taşburun, located 120 kilometers from Istanbul. At that time the population of Istanbul was much smaller than it is now, so the conditions for hunting within 120 kilometers of Istanbul were quite different too. And this is hardly a complete list of all the places through which Comrade Stalin made his way while hunting boars in Turkey. If you look at the map and find the villages mentioned, you can see that Stalin's path ran through all of Turkey, from the far east to the far west.
There are many ways to hunt boars. One can do it just to make money, or one can do it with the goal of comprehending a certain basic sacred truth that makes a person a successful leader. Heracles also hunted a wild boar, which was his 5th labor. But judging by the result, the way Heracles was hunting a wild boar is very different from the way modern-day hunters do it, since these hunters, having gained experience in wild boar hunting, nevertheless remained nothing special. The artists of the last centuries have gone crazy, all of them depicting the Erymanthian boar, as some sort of particularly enormous beast. And Heracles is portrayed as a living mountain of muscles as well. But there is another conception of Heracles, a thinker. This little-known description of Heracles requires clarification. There is an important but overlooked detail in the description of Heracles' fight with the Erymanthian boar. For some reason, the boar climbed high into the mountains, where there was deep snow. Boars have short legs and small hooves in terms of footprint, so boars get hopelessly stuck in deep snow. The Erymanthian boar also got incapacitated by being hopelessly stuck in the snow, and that's when Heracles killed him. Obviously, at that point it could be accomplished without any particular physical effort. So, the distinctive feature of the Erymanthian boar is not his strength at all, though he could still be a very large beast, but his outstanding stupidity. To put it simply, the Erymanthian boar was a degenerate, compared to the average boars, which are considered to be especially intelligent among all other animals. That is, Heracles, unlike modern-day boar hunters, who remain nobody special, acted as a selective breeder. That is, he improved the breed of wild boar the way he was hunting. We already know from the description of his first labor, that Heracles had a worldview of a selective breeder. The Nemean lion was a degenerate, namely, a cannibal. A spiritually healthy, or at least spiritually promising lion, should not be killed, just as a spiritually promising boar should be spared. And we can learn the fact that Comrade Stalin was also a selective breeder, from his biography. While still a seminary student, Comrade Stalin organized 2 underground courses to teach Darwin's evolutionary theory, or rather, Neo-Lamarckism. For future priests, Stalin's thoughts expressed in these underground courses were so interesting that they attended and listened, even though they risked expulsion from the seminary, and as a consequence, the loss of a comfortable life as a clergyman of the state religion. The listeners were in danger of receiving a so-called wolf ticket. It's a great name for such a document. In nature, the example of the selective breeder is exactly that of the wolf. Deer herds serviced by the wolf are much healthier and reproduce better. Prior to becoming a boar hunter, Stalin became a selective breeder, just like Heracles. And unlike ordinary hunters, who could pile up a mountain of dead boars, but would still remain nobody special. By the way, it's only the followers of new religions who don't know that Heracles is a selective breeder. And it's them who consider the boars to be the creatures of hell. But in the ancient religions, with which Heracles was associated, the healthy boar was revered as the embodiment of the god of fertility and magical supernatural force. The topic of magical forces encompasses many pages and various subtopics, including a subtopic about the force of light, and this is a subject in which Comrade Stalin was quite proficient. The truth revealed through the right attitude toward boars is by no means simple. The constellation Taurus is a reminder of this truth. The asterism of the constellation Taurus is the Hyades, that is, the pigs, or the boars. Taurus belongs to the sacred star chart. All the successful rulers of the East knew about the star chart. Stalin was also aware of it. Since people envy Stalin, only his extensive biographies mention his studies in astronomy. We are not talking about astrology here, as uninformed people would immediately think, but about an entirely different, royal pursuit, sacred astronomy. Surprisingly enough, one of the practical applications of royal astronomy is boar hunting, But it should never be done for the purpose of entertainment, thrill, and such, nor should one do it for the purpose of making money. Rather, one should hunt boars with a sacred purpose of learning the laws of our world. It is still possible to find out what motivated Stalin to hunt boars. Today's Turkish journalists, being aware of the Prophet's prohibition on the consumption of pork, suggest that Stalin hunted wild boars for the sake of pig skin, prized by shoemakers. This assumption is logical, for Stalin was the son of a shoemaker, whose workshop was in the basement just below the room in which little Sasa lived. This means that Sasa could not have been left entirely uninformed about raw materials suitable for making shoes. In other words, the explanation why Stalin used to hunt boars, that circulates among journalists familiar with the subject, is a commercial one. Young Stalin, they say, was making money by selling the wild boar skins. Perhaps he did make money by selling the skins. But there were so many other ways to make money. The fact is, that at the end of the Turkish hunting period, young Stalin signed up to work on a whaling ship. And surprisingly quickly he became the ship's bosun, which is a highly respectable position. This is another forbidden page of Stalin's sacred biography. It gets rather ridiculous. There exists a photo of young Stalin, in a sailor's striped shirt, and with a distinctive bosun's ribbon around his neck. This photo is displayed in all reputable museums. However, every single guide refuses to comment on this photo. They cite lack of information. At the same time, an attentive researcher can make sense out of this. Another sacred endeavor is the whale hunting, with its goal to comprehend the meanings of the sky chart. So, boar hunting is followed by contact with whales, which also means, as the circumstances require it, contact with the crew of the whaling ship. And in the case of Comrade Stalin, the link between hunting boars and hunting whales is this. At that time, due to the decline in the whale population close to home, whalers were forced to go to the southern hemisphere for long periods of time. Sometimes they were away for up to 3 years. Food supplies were needed for such a long time at sea. The best solution from the whalers' point of view was to take with them supplies of salted meat, that is, pork preserved in salt. But the farmer's pork was used only if the captain was stingy. Even Columbus knew that the best kind of salted meat for long voyages is wild boar meat. This type of meat in its salted form, if not particularly tasty, is not boring. Maybe to some people, farmed pork tastes better than boar meat, but not when it's preserved in salt. By the way, did the prophet, by prohibiting the consumption of farm pork on land, also prohibited the consumption of boar meat at sea? An interesting incident comes to mind. I once had the good fortune to have a long conversation with an old Romanian man who had fought in World War II as a young man. He had been mobilized in the Romanian army to fight on Hitler's side. His unit was defeated, and he was captured by the Soviets. POWs were used in the USSR to rebuild cities and industrial facilities destroyed by the war. The old Romanian man said that he was very well fed in the camp, where he was a prisoner, and from where he was sent to work on various reconstruction projects. And the camp commander had a special rule. He demanded that the prisoners should sing a song when they returned from their work back to the camp. The old man added, "Well, why shouldn't we sing, as long as we are well fed?" I suppose the old man was comparing where and how they were fed, and the food in Stalin's camp was much better than the food offered in the Romanian army. This, all other things being equal, is a reflection of the character of the ruler. That is, the whaling used to be a very dangerous occupation in those days, because it was taking place in a whaleboat with a crew of 7 to 8 people, and agonizing whales often smashed those boats. So the success depended very much on how well the crew was fed, and accordingly, on the crew's morale.
Crack their backbone! Give way all! Bring those oars here! Oh, he's a buster! Take the oars, lads! Lift your goddamn lungs! Full pressure!
In fact, it was the bosun's job to select the meat for the crew. But this was not the only duty of the bosun. 6 of the 7 men on the boat were ordinary rowers. Of these 6, one was a harpooner, whose task was to be able to throw a harpoon far enough. A harpoon is a heavy object, so great physical strength was required. After the throw, the harpooner would take up the oar again and return to rowing. But the actual killing of a whale, done by plunging a special pike into its body to a great depth, in order to hit a nerve knot, was the most difficult task for the crew of a whaleboat, and it was the duty of either a captain, or a first mate, or a bosun. This required the ability to calculate and intuition. The captain, the first mate, and the bosun were in different whaleboats, of which there were 3 per whaling ship. So the information about Stalin hunting boars is very valuable. It made no sense for Stalin to get hired on a whaling ship whose captain couldn't appreciate a boar meat expert. It wasn't just about the meat, of course, but mostly about the ability to treat people with respect. But it was about boar meat too. And another thing, under a talented captain, the boar meat expert, so to speak, would very quickly be promoted to bosun. Moreover, it's very possible that in those distant and already forgotten times, aggressive wild boars were an ideal target for whale killing training. Maybe back then, the hunters used a knife instead of a rifle to finish off the wild boar. If so, then figuratively speaking, Comrade Stalin became a naval bosun in the dry forests and woods of Turkey. Comrade Stalin did not hunt wild boars the way that rich clients and their mentors do nowadays. That is, Stalin hunted without rifle scopes, and he didn't have modern semi-automatic rifles either. And tree stands were not yet in use. The hunter feels completely safe when hunting from a tree stand, because he is inaccessible for the wounded and therefore furious wild boar. That is to say, there are interesting nuances in Stalin's hunting, or in other words, in shaman hunting. These nuances are best comprehended on the battlefield. By this I mean the process of practically mastering the hunting of wild boars. These are the nuances with which even many of those who call themselves experts in hunting are not familiar nowadays. Boars, generally speaking, behave differently, depending on how spiritually mature the hunter is. These little-known nuances of wild boar hunting allow you to enter the appropriate state of mind, which makes ascending to the abandoned, overgrown and covered by trees ancient cities and temples truly meaningful. Because of this special mood, you will not stupidly stare at the ruins, as tourists usually do. You won't just stare like a stuck pig. Instead, you will be able to obtain the most valuable information, even from observing the temple foundations. Well, of course, you have to consider that the crowd is not wrong, in some sense. Valuable places, that were called taminos in ancient times, are something akin to a denunciation to the crowd, perceived as a reminder of a life lived in vain. Therefore crowds of tourists choose to fill up places with no spiritually promising features, places with purely formal, and therefore fake architectural constructions. On the other hand, truly spiritually promising places are always deserted. You are lucky if you can find some signage with the name of the object when you approach these places. And the route to such sites runs precisely through the habitats of wild boars, which are quite numerous in Turkey, since the people there do not consume pork.
Haram.
These places do not have to be located in dense forests, they could also be in the plains. So aren't oak trees considered sacred by some nations, because acorns are a delicacy for wild boars? The ancestors planted oaks on the way to the sacred places, and protected them. What was the purpose of it in the first place? Was it not to lure wild boars there? There you can see Pryadka taking pictures of a Hittite monument with lions and a Phrygian hat from afar. And he is standing under an oak tree. Oaks are rare around here. But for some reason, there is an oak tree growing in this place as well.
There are plenty of acorns around, and one may think boars come and feed here. The ground is dug up all over.
Here he's yelling that there's a lot of acorns, and maybe boars are grazing here. Maybe it's all connected. Still, you have to keep in mind that oak trees are very rare in this particular part of Anatolia. And maybe in other areas there is no problems with oaks. So it was helpful. The help was meant not for boars, of course, but to seekers of truth. So if everywhere on earth oak trees would grow, only where the priests planted them, it would be possible to reach the most sacred places, simply by pursuing wild boars. But on the other hand, who has determined the quite uneven distribution of places around the world, where oaks actually grow? Be that as it may, life itself always helps the ones who seek the truth.
This is an oak tree. It's an oasis in the midst of this hellish heat. There is plenty of acorns. Maybe there are wild boars here too.